That seems like we're now live.
Yay.
Thank, thank you for everyone who's joining us today. Whether you're in Australia, Finland, somewhere else in Europe, maybe the US or Britain, I hope you enjoy today's live stream, or if you're catching up on this on YouTube later, I hope you can get some insights out of the session. Today, I'm joined by Mareet. I'll ask you to pronounce your name for the audience, please.
Maaret Pyhäjärvi.
Mareet.
I know,
I
yeah, I know it's a little complicated.
I lived in Sweden for a year, so I should be okay with more Scandinavian names, but or at least trying to pronounce A's with an eh sound, but I'm still my tongue just can't wrap myself around it. Um, and I think you are a bit of a superstar in the testing space. I've really enjoyed reading your blogs. Do you mind telling us a bit about yourself before we jump into the pairing session?
I've been working with various types of roles in testing for last 25 years. Currently working as principal test engineer at Vaisala. And my hobbies are also related to work in many ways because the whole writing the blogs and showing up in conferences, it's only mildly a part of my work and a lot more about kind of doing the work related hobbies. So I've been speaking in conferences. I think I'm now up to 450 talks, and I've been blogging when I have something to think about. So I don't really care much if people read it, but it makes it so that there's a huge amount of different kinds of ideas in my blog.
Do you measure any type of traffic to your blog?
Yeah, I can see it. Like it's the Google's platform, so I can see it. I think I can't remember anymore. I was way over 500,000 already, but I was kind of like thinking, oh, next I need to kind of pay attention to when it gets to 1 million.
Fair enough. And what's your experience with the tools for tracking blog traffic?
I don't really care so much about the whole tracking of traffic. I find that it's a little annoying from the user's perspective when people are doing all of this tracking nowadays,
Mm,
and knowing exactly who is there. Like, I can understand why people want that, but in a way also kind of like, just produce and trust that if the content is impactful enough, you'll have good conversations with great people. So,
mm.
one good quality connection is a lot more than hundred thousands of random clicks that you don't know anything about.
Yeah. There's also like privacy considerations too with the GDPR policy privacy updates, particularly impacting a lot of Europeans.
Yeah, definitely. And now the current, I think the trend is a little bit on kind of like creating these lists of like you ask for people's contact information so that you can then sell them something. But for me, I have a job as a tester. Like I don't actually need to collect people that I sell my time and my services to. What I care a lot more for is this idea that I've learned so much during the years, that I want, somehow to be able to scale that knowledge that I have to other people so
Mm,
that they can use it as a platform of starting from wherever I ended up rather than always having to start from the scratch.
mm. Yeah, I think that measuring the impact is really useful. I guess it doesn't really matter where your baseline is if you're trying to focus on improving other people's testing skills or their craft or trying to provide mentoring. I guess it's just nice to see numbers increase over time. Probably indicates you're doing something right. I hope.
Yeah. Well, probably, yeah, it's that. But again, I really value that one good conversation with someone uh, who cares about talking about the same things that I do care about, much more than the 100,000 clicks. So again, having that one person who reaches out and you can have a call with them, and you can talk to them about testing and their trouble, and maybe even learn that they actually found it valuable. That's much better that way.
Also on your profile, you do teach some workshops. Do
Yeah, I
you
do.
have a favorite workshop you like to run?
I don't know if I have a favorite. It's more like I'm a product of the time and the space that I live in. So there's always the most recent ones that I enjoy kind of figuring out. And at some point when I feel like I figured them out, I kind of want to move on. So right now, all of the things that I teach are basically hands-on in an ensemble format, meaning that we take a real piece of software and we figure it out together. And at some point, you get tired of looking at the software that you've seen hundreds of times or tens of times even, and it no longer produces anything new. So that's kind of what gives me the frame. And with different software, depending on what you test, you end up learning very different things. Like if you have something where there's a lot of bugs, you will end up focusing and actually kind of like uh, derailed by the bugs. Whereas if you get some software that is really hard to understand where the bugs might even hide, it takes a lot more in kind of like understanding the domain and figuring out what would be the valuable areas of focus. So I I prefer the ones where you have to do a lot more work, but they are a lot harder to teach.
And I imagine they're also a little bit harder to sell to companies if they're trying to get you on board to run in-depth workshops too.
Yeah, but again, I am not really selling it to companies. I don't have that time. I have a full-time job.
Yeah.
I don't I don't actually want to do that in that sense. So for me, a lot of this is more on the side of I do community things, I do conference things, and then the companies that I have sold this to, they basically reach out to me because someone already participated in one of my sessions. But I cannot scale it by kind of like I can't just sell my time. Like I don't have that time to sell.
Yes, it is a challenge for a lot of people who enjoy the mentoring and the teaching is coming up with that scalability compromise as well.
Yeah.
Cool. So today's in-depth testing session, we're going to try and walk through the software testing conference application process. We'll see how this goes, and we'll see what happens. But if someone wanted to attend or speak at a testing conference, there's this list of software testing conferences. And we can see that there are some with an open call for presentations. Do you know of any conference that might have an open call at the
I'm
moment?
not actually sure. I haven't really followed that. I have basically myself nowadays the principle that there's one form of payment that is more important to me than others, and it's the respect of my time. So I don't do random submissions to conferences.
Mm.
I expect them to know what kind of contents I provide and contact me first. So that's the payment
Yeah,
perspective for me.
I think there's the and yeah, as a busy individual, it can be hard to keep track of all of these different things going on. And it is nicer when companies recognize yourself as a professional uh, and can reach out in that capacity.
Yeah. And again, like it's nice that there are people. I think this is Chris Kent's website.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's nice that we have people who kind of like, follow this stuff for the others, and we could kind of rely on going to their pages and seeing whatever is going on. So that's definitely my go-to source also on like when I tell new aspiring speakers on looking for a conference that they could speak at, go on that page and figure out if there's one that you'd like. And again, the advice on kind of like, figuring out what's open right now, if there's a place where you usually see your kind of people, or if it's in a location that you'd really want to travel, like all of those are really great criteria for selecting your own conference. So I'm,
I
I'm just noticing
yeah.
this
So
page is getting actually a lot more complicated to read now that we have, some of the stuff online and we have the different statuses. So kind of
yeah.
filtering would be
Yeah.
a really great way of getting to whatever you were just looking for.
Oh, yeah, actually, that could be a really good exploratory point of view. If you were trying to find a conference,
Mhm.
what type of filtering? If we were building out a filtering feature, what would that
So
look like?
probably, well, the first one would probably be the one that you were just asking for. It's kind of like which ones of these are right now looking for speakers. So you have probably the two main perspectives here that you'd want to test for, at least two, probably will discover more. But one of them is kind of the speaker's perspective, and the other one is the participant's perspective. And they are very, very different. And I at least don't know if this is, well, I would assume this is built for both perspectives. But if one is considered kind of the main stakeholder, main user type, or the other one.
Yeah, is the main audience participants or uh, other stakeholders?
Yeah.
I can't spell. Who are the stakeholders?
But I think this page is much more on the side of just listing the conferences. So if there's the call for proposals, I think this isn't one of those platforms where you handle the entire process of organizing a conference. There's a lot of other ones where, again, like comparing to other solutions that are somehow similar, like the Conf Engine,
Yeah, yeah, that's the one I was just
where
thinking of.
you have the conference organizer perspective is kind of heavy there as well. That it's easy to organize for reviews, and it's easy to organize for just scheduling things and getting the conference site in place. But that's a whole different type of a conference website.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of tools that if you're running a commercial or more commercial focused conference rather than a community focused conference, you don't have web developers within your community, using a tool like Convention might be okay. I think the like for example the Python conferences, because they're community driven, um, they're written by the community as well.
Yeah, I think it's the same, for example, for the Java, the DevOps community. So actually, it's pretty much so that each of the big ones have their own, which then means that for the regular users, like the conference participants and the conference speakers, it is a lot more complicated to discover where the conferences are. And that's where sites like Chris Kent's, the one that we're now kind of, mainly focusing on, they become really, really kind of central, because you can't even imagine all the conferences that are out there, and you can spend a week googling for conferences and trying to figure out which one when, and if it's has an open call for papers. An actual problem.
Yep. Yes, and that's something that I think has become more popular with more American companies, is if they want to have their staff on the circuit for speaking at conferences, they've now got a more dedicated role, which they tend to call either developer evangelist or developer advocate. And part of that role is generally an expectation to go speak at more conferences. Um, but these companies literally have someone almost as their full-time position, trying to keep on top of conferences. And so if you're trying to do this as a hobby, it can get quite challenging.
Yeah, it can. But then again, I already had this kind of like remote work was allowed type of setting before the whole COVID situation. So I could just kind of like, jump on a plane and sit 24 hours in a plane to Australia and work from the plane, and then be in Australia. Well, while I'm in a conference, I'm definitely wanting to meet the people that I traveled there for. I never travel for the location. I travel for the people. So I want to hang out with the people. So then I have kind of like, again, a little more minuses, but using those kind of moments and still taking things forward. And also, well, for me at least, it's encouraged me to build a version of my job as a tester in whatever team I am, so that they are not relying on me in order to make releases or get features tested. So it forces me to think in ways of kind of like, how do I share my work with the entire team? So it's also a great way of improving processes in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that trying to reduce the bottleneck on testing is Really interesting problem. And if you're, you want more flexibility with your work, it can be interesting to try and help share that testing experience.
Yeah.
Have there been any challenges with trying to get developers to take on that testing mindset in your team?
Usually, it starts with all kinds of excuses, and the most common excuse, of course, is the tools. Uh, in my current team, we've been using robot framework, and some of the developers haven't yet used robot framework, so they're basically saying it would take them a month to learn it so that they are, comfortable enough to do any of the work, which then basically means they don't get to ever take that month. And when I move them, it actually takes them less than a day, but the excuse is kind of big and heavy, and having that argument is well, it's definitely difficult.
I've definitely thrown the same excuse out for learning a new automation tool on my side as well. I've been just chucked in the deep end with a TypeScript test framework, writing it from the ground up, and I'm like, I have never written in TypeScript before or done much functional programming. So and my brain was just putting in barriers and going, no, too hard, can't do it.
Yeah.
And it took
But
a couple of
again,
days of procrastination and just pairing with other people on the team to try and overcome that mindset.
yeah. But also kind of like whether you have the organization support in the idea that this is not just your work, it's the entire team's work. It kind of makes the world of a difference. And what I love about this work in many ways is, there's always another day. The thing that you say no to me today on, I can ask again tomorrow, and I can get that in a week or in a month or in 6 months. So there's this kind of like continuous small pieces or small steps that you can take towards the place that you want to be in, and the fact that you remove yourself from the organization, just it's a good way of doing things. So well, I've had much better, well, much worse excuses being away for myself than being in a conference speaking to others and learning about testing. So this is good.
I think Agile Testing Days is one of the conferences I've had on my bucket list of I've wanted to attend for a while. I thought I was going to get to the Potsdam Agile Testing Days, I think a few years ago, but my company said I can't work remotely because the client wouldn't allow it. And I think they had like one conference in October and then it was EuroSTAR in Copenhagen a month later. So I was hoping to work remotely in Europe for a month, but nah, they said no. And so I had to withdraw, I think, out of, or at least the attempt of attending. But that was, it's still definitely on the bucket list of one of those. A lot of people tend to say it's a good conference.
It is a good conference. Definitely one of my favorites.
Yes, and they are this one, I think, according to that list, has been postponed until next year,
Next year. Yeah.
but it
So the
doesn't.
next one coming up should be the Potsdam version this autumn. So again, kind of like finding the conferences based on you already have an idea what you're looking for might be a
Yeah,
little complicated.
yeah. So there's no real comparison really because I'm using my own feedback from the community of what's a good conference, or what's a well regarded conference. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. Could you incorporate a ranking system with conferences?
Well, you can always do that, but I probably personally wouldn't. Um, every conference, they build their kind of own community, and they like to keep themselves in a particular kind of how would I say this? Like they want to position themselves as a particular kind of a conference, and when someone external to those communities and organizers would start creating a ranking system, I can imagine a lot of bad will, not goodwill, but bad will happening there.
Yeah.
And then you would have all the considerations around how can I play this. And since we are talking about sites targeted to testers, there's going to be someone who creates that script who does some way of just clicking your own up or somebody else's thing downvoted. And um, I see more risks than benefits in that area, so I wouldn't go for that.
Mm. But I think like having a well, again, I guess it comes back to that filtering. If you wanted to filter based on maybe how long the history of the conference, if it's run for like 20 or 30 years, it might have a different theme. If it's really commercial focused, like the Eurostar conferences are really big. They have, also like conference size. If it's a 3,000 capacity conference, or is it a 300-person conference, or is it even
But
smaller?
these all are variables that change every single year.
Yeah.
So if you tried incorporating that, like Eurostar has been like 3,000, even 5,000 people at some point. And now, well, I think it's been 2,000 people actually at some point. Now I think it's more close to 1,000.
Mm.
And I think generally the trend with all of the big conferences is that they're smaller than they used to be. So the big times of testing conferences where there's a huge crowd, uh, it's not that way anymore. We have so many options. So in a way, as a user, when you come to a site like this and you want to choose, a conference, you're going to choose based on location. You're
Okay.
going to choose based on time frame that is appropriate for you, and maybe price range. Like having prices available here might be nice, but you would have to be again then implementing some way of kind of getting to those prices, because the prices are never the same for different people. If you have a discount or not, you might have a there's so many rules around those. So again, having been to enough conferences, I can just see so many things going wrong when you're trying to implement those features.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's fine. Like this is just a hypothetical exploration of
yeah,
some of
yeah.
the struggle points. I think to come back to those prices as well, like you have exchange rates that feed into like the different currencies. And often there's early bird discounts, and yeah, a whole bunch of different considerations that would make that a really hard feature to try and even build.
Yeah. But again, kind of like as someone who looks at conferences, this site has a lot of information on kind of locations. I'd actually be really curious, for example, on the information, just to understand this industry. Like, is there a particular location in the world where there's more conferences on testing than somewhere else?
Hmm.
Or the other way around, are there some places of the world that have no conferences? And is that actually true? Like, is Chris able to find all the conferences here? Most likely, it is based still on somehow him just following a lot of people and people speaking in those conferences and sharing the locations and just kind of being active in figuring it out. But I think, for example, I almost never see any African conferences, and I do know, well, I follow the developer community in particular in Africa. So I know that there's a lot of conferences there as well, but they might be a lot more local in the sense.
Yeah, yeah. I kind of feel like this list is definitely more European and I think US focused. Um, and it would be really if you've got no community connections with South Africa, which is also a fairly like I guess English speaking part of that world, um, then yeah, it's going to be hard to get that on the list here.
So I would assume you can get that on the list, but you would have to reach out first. So is there, by the way, some link where you can reach out to Chris and just
And
propose a new conference? What did it have on top?
about mailing list. Subscribe, contribute. I think there's a way to contribute.
Okay.
Um,
Oh, so much text.
There isn't an email,
Yeah,
but
yeah. There's a repo, so
it's a GitHub repository. But any concerns, reach out on Twitter, and I guess that would take to his go to his
yes.
and I assume he's got open DMs.
I
Okay.
wouldn't know. We follow one another, so we've probably been talking anyway.
Yeah, so there seems to be at least a channel for providing feedback. Um, but you do have to filter for a little bit of information.
Yeah.
At least there is also a newsletter that goes out once a month as well.
Oh, that by the way says what are eligible conferences. So let's check that one out.
Eligible conferences.
So what should you put on this list? Only
Uh,
software testing. So it doesn't say that it has location based or commercial or non-commercial, anything like that. But it's just as long as it's about testing.
yeah, the heuristic is if it includes the name like test or quality or how it describes itself.
Okay.
So I wonder if I do a quick Google for software testing conference Africa, if we get anything that comes up. Software testing conferences in South Africa.
Oh, there is a filter. No, there's a conference index.
I think this is a
There's a
different
different one.
website.
Yeah. So clearly we do have some.
We've got the International Conference of Software Evolution and Testing. Now that's a mouthful of an acronym there. Um,
That's an academic conference. And I think actually I would claim that maybe academic conferences are not presented in Chris's list. So can we go for Chris's list and check if it has ICST, for example, which is one of the big academic conferences on testing?
I S
ICST.
I
IC,
I C S.
ICST.
Yeah, there does
So
seem
it
to
has at
be.
least it has some of them at least.
There's
Yeah,
one in the list.
yeah, yeah.
Do,
Well, the most recent one was, I think you should check from the past list. I think it was
I
somewhere around June timeframe, maybe. Uh, and it was an online version. So again, ICST has different ones.
oh yeah, there's a
Uh,
couple there that have been in
yeah,
the past. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I was
That's the
what
big one. Now you found it.
yeah. So that's what I was thinking of the big academic conferences is something with the IEEE. Uh, Usually you can tell if they're trying to seem more professional because they have acronyms like this.
Yeah. But again, kind of like from the participant's point of view, not understanding any of this context that we're just now talking about, kind of the academic and vendor oriented and kind of community or kind of content oriented conferences, uh, it would be really hard to choose which one to take. ICST and things, well, the academic conferences in general, the whole process of applying into them is very paper focused. Like you have to write a full paper and they will read the paper. It needs to be research and it needs to be fitting those criteria. So it also means all of the presentations are about things that are, well, not necessarily done in companies, but like ideas that they would wish that somewhere in the next 20 years companies would maybe try after they have been kind of fine tuned into the way that they need to be.
Yeah. I find also the academic presentation can be very hard to make an academic presentation engaging because you have to it's kind of based off academic research and so there's I think there's different requirements to writing a good academic paper versus giving that as a presentation.
You have to present the paper, so you have to present whatever you wrote in that paper. So that kind of sets the tone of it. But you do have a lot of flexibility on what you use your little time on the presentation, so that you can make it engaging. But usually there's a very clear kind of pattern that you follow in delivering that talk. And it's so much easier when you don't try to make it engaging and you don't try to incorporate stories, which is what we would say for any other conference talks that they make it better.
Yeah, yeah, that with academic presentations, you don't really have a focus on that story, and so it can be really hard to engage with the content. Whereas quest for quality, that in terms of that compared to IEEE conference, um,
I haven't been to Quest for Quality.
it's just I was just looking at it in this list of past ones, and I'm like, that one just sounds more interesting from my point of view personally than IEEE software testing standards. I
Yeah.
don't know if their website's still up. Yeah, I don't think their website's still up. Oh, no, that
Yeah,
was a
it is.
very long load time.
Yeah. And again, like if you go through different conferences websites, there's so many different kinds. So it's a endless source of exploration if you wanna go there.
Yeah, there's, like, what type of information are conferences trying to, um what are the main things that they're trying to get across?
Usually, I think it's around kind of like you have different people coming with different needs. So throwing you directly into a part of the page that answers your specific needs is what they're a lot of times trying to do. Again, like if you're advertising and you want to track kind of which advertisements took you where, designing for that is something conferences do a lot. But it's kind of like where and what and when and how much. And I think people very often start from the fact of like, well, how much is this going to be? Do I even want to know more?
Yeah, I think there's also like if you're organizing a conference, there's potentially two audiences you're trying to attract to your conference. There's potential sponsors, so you can help get the more community support. But then there's also the participants and potentially also the speakers you're trying to attract as well.
Yeah.
And then internet
Uh,
bots for scraping as well.
well, definitely, yes. The sponsors, I would imagine, are looking at the page a little bit, as in kind of like where are they placed on this page. So a lot of the sponsors kind of want to be the first thing you see when you come to the conference. So kind of like a visible position.
Mm, yeah.
So not just kind of like on a sponsors page, but really on the main page. And of course, there's categories then for sponsors and who gets to be on that, most highly visible place on the front page because you can't fit all of these there.
Mm,
But another thing with sponsors is they a lot of times really want to buy the participants' contact information or the right to contact the participants through the conference organizer once. So if the conference is free for the participants, it usually means you are the product, and figuring out a way of giving your email address with the my name plus something that is specific to the conference so that you can just put it in the trash right away when the emails start arriving,
yeah.
and categorize them. I I I use that a lot for different enrollments.
Yeah, I'm going to so I will take a note of that on this. So if you've got your email, and I don't know if I can zoom in on this one. Oh, I can make it larger. So Sam plus test conference uh, at blah. Um, that is a little too large. But if you add a plus after your email address, this will still come to your main email, but you'll be able to filter out the things with the tags. If you need to inject a valid email, but still want it redirected towards your main email account.
Yeah, and I've also seen conferences that recognize that we are using this pattern and they take the blasting out and they just blast it into your inbox anyway, which I think kind of doesn't match the contract that I'm making because I'm giving an email where I'm accepting it. And what I do after that should be my business. So if I was creating some kind of an application where I was making these considerations, uh, I'd probably not take out the thing after the plus, but I do know that some do.
Yeah, I think that would be like from a user point of view, that's kind of going against the trust of the user. The user is giving you this information to use, and you're deciding that you know better as this website who's doing the marketing. Um, and you're like, yeah, I don't care about the information you've given me, user. I'm going to filter out some of the parts that might make your life a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Um, or you can just have like a junk spam email with any email provider. um, I've got like one email account I've had since I was 12, and I get a lot of spam in that one because it's been leaked in, I think, about 12 different data breaches.
Yeah.
Oops, I didn't mean to click through on a sponsor. Um, but yeah, I guess so. Conferences are often trying to help you answer the question of when, where, and how much. Um, and we kind of do, we get like when and where on this list, but we don't necessarily get how much. But I think it would be quite hard to create like an open standard for
Yeah.
for like if every conference had its own API where you could uh pull that information. I don't think conferences are going to create an open standard to make their websites easier to navigate.
Yeah, that's the next idea for Chris to try to set that up with all the conferences in the world. Give information with this API.
Yeah, I think there could be a way to build a bot that monitors for announcements and can potentially scrape data, but the data's not going to be consistent in a consistent format for any of these websites. So it'd almost be like a custom bot per.
But also, again, we have market-based pricing for some of the conferences. So, depending on where your bot runs, what IPs does it show like it's coming from, it might get different prices. Or there might be, well, not usually conferences, but there might be things where you don't actually see the real price before you contact them. So it might also be that the prices with all the discounts that you end up getting on that particular day, you get to them, not on the main page, but when you go further in the process of registering. Like, hey, there was the Wednesday sale today, so you get 50% discount on all conference registrations. So it
Hmm,
might be that the web page is always not having all of this information and kind of relying on third party information that others can change at will, that isn't kind of like, systematically and programmatically available to you. You might not be serving your audience better by including that, even though it seems like they'd like it. They wouldn't like it when it actually misleads them.
hmm. I
So hey,
noticed.
let's look at the stuff like what he's actually including. He's only including the date and
Yep.
the location. Then some kind of like if the conference has a Twitter presence.
One of the things
And
I find irritating with online conferences is I live in Australia. I would like to know which time zone. Um, because this says Agile Testing Days. I know it's a European conference, but that's also an assumption.
oh yeah, it would actually maybe be better to say it's online and Germany.
Yeah, like a rough country of, or at least what time zone they're trying to align with, because there've been so many US online conferences that I mean like I see come up in my feed. I'm like, oh, well, that sounds interesting. I'd actually really like to go see Angie Jones again. But when I do the conversion, it's like that's 2 a.m. my time. I don't think I'm staying up that late.
Yeah, definitely.
But if I could save myself the mental load of doing that arithmetic before, like, before I've, discovered a conference, I've gotten excited about the agenda and the speakers, and then I'm like, "What time is it?" And I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah. To an extent, you have the same one, not just with the online ones, but the in-person ones. Kind of like what is the time difference for that particular one? But for the online ones, you'd really want to see kind of when is it running. But it will also be very complicated to explain. Like I just took part in Agile 2021 conference,
yeah,
and it was a conference that was trying to run for three different time zones. So basically, the way they did the conference is that you had a 3 hour slot for the North Americas, then a 3 hour slot for the Europe, kind of the best time for Europe, and then a 3 hour slot for the, well, the
Asia Pacific?"
other side of the world where you are. Yes. So uh, trying to describe that on this web page would be kind of difficult.
Yes, if it is like a big national or a big international conference where they are actually trying to do more time zone stuff, it would be hard to try to communicate this one. I guess with some conference like Southeast Asian Testing Conference, I know it says that's online, but at least it says the location.
Yeah.
So
And
you can.
one of the pieces of information that I also kind of like, well, I track it elsewhere, but I would really want to track on something like this from a speaker's perspective, is the speaker compensation. So I run personally a website called paytospeak.org,
Let's bring that one on.
and I think it's paytospeak.org, or maybe or it's com. I can't remember anymore. I open them so rarely. So this is a very simple website where I just wanted to have a place to get to this kind of like a Google sheet that we've been collecting. Like if you are a speaker, where to, and you are maybe not, well, financially inclined to pay for having to speak. Like, for
Mm.
example, Eurostar conference, when it is in person, they don't pay for your travel, they don't pay for your accommodation. It's actually a really expensive conference to speak at. So you get a free ticket. It would be, that's already good that you get the free ticket. But if you're paying out of your own pocket, having to find a hotel in a major European city, it's not cheap, actually.
Yeah, I
So,
I opted to speak at EuroSTAR the one time I was accepted to 2 or 3 conferences in Europe because traveling from Australia, that's a $1,300 plane ticket.
yeah,
Um, and not receiving any compensation from my company either was also a sticking point, a bit sour.
yeah. And for me, well, some of the years I was traveling a lot and I was paying out of my pocket, even if the conferences were paying me back. So I remember this one particular Christmas when the conferences hadn't yet compensated me for the expenses. And I didn't have the money to buy Christmas present to my kids.
Oh,
Because the conferences were holding my money for months and months, because you only get paid back the money you invest in a conference after you've been in the conference. So the timing was just so inconvenient, and I had, overcommitted. I didn't understand the financial implications. So that's why kind of this financial aspect of which are the good players, which ones do I recommend as the good players who don't make you pay to speak. I was tracking that. Now that everything is online, it no longer has the same kind of implication. So definitely a little bit different. But I don't. Well, like you can see from the list, I'm monitoring the ones that I've spoken at rather than the ones that are testing only, because in every single developer conference you actually have some talks about testing. Well, at least you should have. Sometimes they're part of one presentation, sometimes there's a dedicated presentation, or there might be even an entire track. So it's a really fuzzy line to draw which ones are testing conferences and which ones are developer conferences. And I think we shouldn't be maintaining that separation between programming and testing anymore.
I get more value from attending developer focused conferences because they kind of are outside of my day to day. I like to feel like I keep up to track with software testing news and updates. and whatnot. I just generally get more value out of things that are outside my comfort zone. Um, but yeah, there's often a lot of developers who are talking about testing and quality at these developer focused conferences too.
Yeah, well, I do go to some of the developer oriented conferences, but sometimes they are really exhausting because they just don't understand what you do and where you come from. And then you have to answer questions like why should you even exist? What do you do? And kind of like explain to me like I didn't understand anything. Like what are you even, doing in this whole space of software development. And then there's of course the other way around where it's kind of like, yeah, we need testers, we don't know what they do, but we know we need them, and we don't care to look at what they do because they're separate. So crossing those existing uh, borders kind of like between the roles, it can take a lot more energy. So for me, testing conferences for testers, where developers are of course also welcome, they're more energizing, whereas the developer conferences tend to leave me drained, and I feel like I have to continuously navigate kind of a mild hostility even.
Yeah, that's an interesting sentiment. I guess the always feeling like you have to justify your role and position to an audience that might not necessarily always work side by side with testers.
Yeah, and again, even if they work side by side, there is a form of side by side where the developers basically close their eyes and says, they do something, they somehow sometimes find bugs, but we don't know what they do and why it takes so long. But they are the professionals in whatever they're doing. And
Testing magic.
this particular attitude is something that I've needed to fight within my team. That you do not, product owner, you do not ever need to apologize from me on suggesting how I should test. And same for developers. Never apologize for giving me proposals. Like I know that they have worked before with testers who kind of like take it as in like, don't tell me I'm a professional, but I'm a professional who is imperfect and I forget things and I don't pay attention to the same things. And feeling like we are on the same side is really important to me. So always give me advice. That's what I try to
Mm,
teach them.
mm. Yeah, being able to collaborate effectively, even if it's on just a bit of tooling to help make the testing either from the dev or the testing side a little bit easier, um,
Mhm.
is something that is quite useful. But yeah, this is a really interesting spreadsheet. I imagine um, when I hope the pandemic eases up at some point in the future, it would be really nice. Um, I would like to go travel outside of 5 kilometers of my house at some point. Hopefully on a plane overseas. It would be nice. Um, I think there will be hopefully more in-person conferences, but the focus is on that sense of community. Um, well, I guess we'll see how conferences go in the future. I think the blended conference where it's both in person but also accessible online should be a really interesting model. But then it's like, how do you also have online speakers as well, and how do you accommodate both of those?
Well, we already see some of those. So I watched one conference where there was a picture of the people in the room and Janet Gregory on a big screen. So remotely participating as a speaker. So it seems like we are already getting to some of those hybrids.
Mm. Yeah, I just hope the internet connection we have here down in Australia can support some of that stuff. We have really shit internet.
Mm.
I'm glad it's
And I'm
holding up for
person
me today.
Mm. I am personally on a traveling break. I haven't yet decided when I quit being on a traveling break, but I made a commitment to my kids that they can, live in their own home and in their own rooms, and that means I will not be leaving the same space for more than half a day at a time. So I come home for the night, and that means I am not traveling. So for me, I quit conferences in the end of 2019. at 400 talks back then, and I swore I'm not going to conferences anymore. And well, I ended up doing 50 more since because of the online forced
Yeah.
things.
Do you mind if I ask how old are your kids?
Currently, they're 12 and 13.
Yeah, I imagine it's nice to be able to support them during some of those school years and get to see a bit more of them rather than
Yeah,
being
it's that of course, but it's a lot more on the side of kind of like when you have your life set up in a certain way, like you have your own room and your own setup and you have your own friends
mm,
and having to then go on, the grandma's place and stay there in a space that is more confined. I would not have enjoyed it, so I don't want to do that to the next generation. So
mm,
when you're traveling, there's always this kind of organizing for them to go somewhere. So for me, it's really easy to organize them to go somewhere, but it takes away from their enjoyment of having that personal space.
mm. Yeah, it has been like I guess the pandemic's been really interesting for promoting uh online conferences now by
Yeah,
default.
definitely.
I think earlier on in the pandemic, I was reluctant to attend any conference online, I guess, because I was just this always being online and always on conference calls meant I didn't want to spend also my spare time on another conference call. uh because there is a little bit of it's hard to maintain, I think, that personal connection, that connection with the people when you're sitting at home trying to attend a conference. Has there been an online conference do the personal connection stuff well?
Yeah, there's the unconferences generally. So my favorite ones are the Socrates conferences, software craftsmanship and testing conferences.
Are they
It's an unconference, so I wonder if I don't think Socrates is there. So there's Socrates UK, for example,
okay?
or Socrates Digital
Yeah,
that
I
you can
can't.
try finding. This is upcoming, so it should be passed now. The last Socrates was a few months ago.
Okay. Oh yeah, there we go. In
So
Switzerland.
the Canaries one and the Switzerland one, I don't know if the UK one is there. So the Socrates Digital is the one that I've taken recently. The Socrates Germany is going online now as well for the autumn time. So it's coming up next on the Socrates family. But I particularly like the Socrates UK ones. Like it has one of the friendliest communities that I know. But also then we have Frogs Conference, Friends of Good Software, Frogs. That's on the upcoming side. So it's going to be in a month. Uh, uh, some of my favorite organizers, well, Elizabeth Zagreba is definitely one of my favorite conference organizers. So when she organizes, I go, and that's again an unconference, meaning you don't see the agenda in advance, but people who show up will bring content, and you can bring whatever questions or content you have. So if you want to try out kind of like sharing some ideas, that's a great place to go for that type of thing. And well, if you are like me, where you're building sessions and trying to figure out how do people learn testing by trying it out with different applications, then well, unconferences are one of the best places that I know where to find audiences. They organize the audience for you already, and they are usually very cheap.
Yeah, I think I've only attended one unconference format, but it does seem like a really interesting, engaging idea where it's more workshop based and it's people trying to work through a problem rather than having a predefined lecture. There's a focus more on interaction and coming to a solution together rather than just sitting there and having information wash over you.
You can also have lectures. Like if I have a talk that I want to test with an audience, I can go there and rehearse. Like for example, I remember there was the predecessor of the Frogs conference, one of those sessions. uh, I was in an in-person version where one of the people who was participating said that he was preparing for a conference talk and he had his first version available and was asking people to actively give feedback. So he delivered the talk, and then we had a conversation on how we can improve his delivery. So you can use it for whatever needs you have. So one of the reasons, or one of the things I've learned about unconferences is you can go there to be kind of selfish. So if you have a thing you need, the others, they can choose with their feet. They can show up if it's something they feel like they want, and they can walk away even in the middle if they don't want to be there. And it creates that space where you can try things out. You don't have to have a committee making those choices for you. The people in that space will make the choice with their feet. And virtual feet is particularly easy because you can just kind of quietly leave from the background and just move into another space. So that workflow, especially with Socrates and this Frogs conference, they've really got that nicely down. So
Okay, I'll definitely have to keep that in mind. Because it seems like it'd be an interesting experience from a also from an online point of view. I had never really considered attending those types of conferences in an online format because I've always associated them with, decent in-person ones.
yeah, I personally think the online ones have been to an extent even better. The trouble, of course, is not everyone is super comfortable with the online post-its and online facilitation. So in the beginning, there were less people doing hands-on types of sessions, but it's been increasing as the pandemic situation still continues. So we've had time to practice.
Do you have a good tool for that you use for online workshop facilitation?
I personally use Morale, but these conferences, they usually come with a tool of their choice, and they kind of have all the, well, most at least for the of the Mural, M-U-R-A-L,
Oh,
Murale,
no.
Mural. Yes, no e's, no
Okay.
e in the end. Mural,
Yeah.
that one. Yes.
Oh, okay. Um, I think I would pronounce that word as mural. That's why it's like I didn't know how to spell it.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm knowing how to pronounce it. Again, this is the Finnish version of pronouncing it, so
Yeah,
it's
no,
not one
no,
of
that
my.
that that's fine. I think there's different ways of pronouncing lots of words. Yeah, this kind of reminds me of we've been using Miro at work a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, my
Um,
my row is, that's what I say. My row is that's the one that both of these, well, at least the Frogs conference crowd is using this one, but they're very similar. So there's plenty of these types of tools, and I don't have a particular preference towards either any one of them. But of course, having licenses to all of them, well, you need at least a license for the organizer, and then the others can join in remotely. So
Yeah, a lot of those platforms have link sharing for collaboration where you don't necessarily need an account to be able to jump on a workshop and help flesh it out,
yeah,
which can be quite useful in that situation.
yeah.
Okay. Well, we're fairly close to time. If anyone wants to pop in any questions in the stream chat, we've had Dimaren Dimarenich say hi. Hi. So we got some interaction. But feel free to post any
Great.
questions and I'll try to shoot them. If someone was looking to attend a conference and they'd never been to one before, what would you recommend they try to look out for that first conference experience?
I think all conferences can be really nice. I would probably start more local, uh, or if I'm aspiring to learn to start speaking, I would go to the place where I want to speak. So again, um there's a lot of free ones as well. but the free ones will get they will choose to have a limited set of speakers available, so the contents will be very different. So find something that you feel that is useful to you and just, you know, try a few places. So don't spend all your money on one.
And if you feel like if you're concerned you don't have a story to tell, you most definitely do. Everyone has a unique experience through their career and the projects they've worked on. And it's always fascinating to learn from others how they've learned about software testing. So, even just talking about your story is a unique experience that is worth sharing. So, don't
Definitely.
feel like you have nothing to talk about, because your whole experience through your career is completely unique too.
Mm.
Any final sentiments for anyone?
I wanted to still kind of mention that, interestingly, this session we kind of explored our knowledge about conferences, uh, not really a lot about testing the application. So that's definitely something that, it's interesting to see how things unfold. And I have still like a gazillion things that I think we could test on that particular website. And the idea that we a lot of times do in testing is kind of giving feedback specifically to someone who is asking for it. So in that sense, kind of like we crossed a lot of borders here
Mm.
in our session. So I think that's an interesting note to take on this one.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes my pairing sessions don't get into a lot of testing, but if Chris was on the line right now and if he was asking for feedback, I think some of the feedback we potentially had was what were some of the points, the main points? Um, the
I think it's
time,
mostly on the filtering,
yeah, like it's been
filtering and the types of the online time zone stuff.
yeah. So online time zone, if it's available, would be useful for some of these online conferences. Um, we've been using the command find uh, to try and find different conferences, but that's because we also knew about different conferences that we were looking for. So switching between past and upcoming to compare that information, it was a little bit hard to remember where I was on the page, but it was only
Mm.
because we were switching between past and upcoming.
Yeah, and for us to test this, kind of like things like the registration is open. I assume it probably is just connected with the date of the conference. So registration is no longer open when the conference is passed. I think it's probably that simple, but we didn't go into his GitHub and look at all on the way this is implemented.
Yeah.
So we kind of,
Oh, yeah, we didn't even explore there's code on GitHub. We didn't even explore any of that.
yeah, there's a lot of stuff we kind of ended up missing because we let ourselves get carried away from the fact that there's so many links and it takes us to so many different places. So but this is what easily happens with exploratory testing. So I kind of wanted to conclude on that, that there's always a good moment of reflecting on, is this the result you wanted? It might be valuable otherwise, but it might not be what you originally assumed you would be getting.
Yeah, I didn't even click on the GitHub repository because there is so much you can explore from a testing point of view, just having a walk through the code and trying to comprehend what the intention was as well.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe we need a second session where we just, take the focus of, let's just look at everything we can look at in Chris's site and see what information we can give that we think is valuable, so that he doesn't have to, listen to all the other stuff around this, and he can just get the specific feedback that we might have on his site.
Maybe we should try and get Chris online for a three pair session.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I'm going to reach out to Chris and see if he's interested in doing some. We'll do some pair programming on his code base,
Yeah.
or try. I don't know what's the when it's more than a pair. It's the three to
Ensemble.
ensemble mob programming. One of those terms. Anyway, thank you everyone for joining the channel or watching this on YouTube. I hope you have a good evening.